I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is the destination for high performers. We talk to people from different genres, different niches, just people doing really interesting things in their space. We talk to lots of CEOs, we talk to a lot of athletes, entrepreneurs, and again, just people doing really interesting things. We can find out a little bit about their journey and what they're doing, and hopefully translate some of them into our own lives as well. And I know I have one of those guests today, some really interesting stuff I know we're going to talk about. Just before we jump into that, you know that if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, that we are sponsored by Thirdsy, and Thirdsy is cool from the standpoint of that they're natural products and they help athletes, high performers, just people wanting to kind of get better quality rest and recovery, and also from mental stress as well. So they have a PM recovery collagen that's melatonin free, it's sedative free, and helps you get quality rest while supporting joint and muscle repair as well. So definitely check that out. If you go to thirdsy.com, you can go there directly, or if you go through our Instagram profile, you'll see the link there, and you can use the code BIBM20 and save 20% off if it's something you're interested in. So definitely check that out. So really happy to have Claire Bays with us today. She is a wellness and mindset coach. She has her own podcast. She's a CrossFit trainer. She's an entrepreneur, a content creator, lots of things going on that I know we're going to go into. She's also a competitive athlete herself, has done things like high rocks and CrossFit and OCR. And the other part is that she's also an inspiring sober living advocate as well, that hopefully we can talk a little bit about today. So Claire, very busy for you, I know. So thanks very much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your consideration. As I mentioned before we started recording, I do appreciate it. It's an honor to get to be here and to speak to your community. I'm excited to hopefully connect with some of them after that. I think this is like the coolest part of doing things like this is the connection afterwards. So
Yeah.
anyway, I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thanks for coming on and sharing because you've got a really interesting story that I know a lot of people will take something away from, and maybe if people kind of quickly look, they see your athletic pursuits and that kind of varied success that you're experiencing now. It wasn't always that way. So maybe why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey from that end to get where you are today? You've had I guess, a different path than some, and so why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm aware that these are roughly 30 minutes in length. So I'm going to have to
Yeah.
put a lot together really fast or do my best
Yeah.
to do so.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. I am 32 years old now. I did not grow up playing sports. And so as far as like the perceived success that you're talking about today,
Yeah.
getting to be the athlete, getting to be the coach, all of those things, even all through my 20s, like if you'd have told me that I'd ever be an athlete or I'd ever be a coach, I would have said, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
My upbringing was just pretty stereotypical small town and I suppose stereotypical. It was just rural-ish Oklahoma. And I quickly found my way to, you know, alcohol and then more from there. And so I just didn't have a whole lot of structure, I suppose you could say, growing up. And so,
Yeah.
mind you, I'm perfectly at peace with that. And everyone has their own flavor of what they've been through, right? This is just my specific flavor, but it's not a traditional path. I didn't go from athlete to coach or anything like that. I didn't play sports growing up. And so whenever people look today, they see a version that exists today. And it's just, like you said, it's a bit unconventional, I suppose. And so it doesn't make it better or worse. It's just mine. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I got into a gym when I was in my 20s. I prior to that had started gaining weight and I wasn't happy about that. I grew up in a family that struggled with obesity. And so I had intimate awareness of that's detrimental effect on your quality of life. And so as I started to gain weight, of course, from the vanity standpoint, wasn't happy about it, but then also just knowing how limiting it truly was. And I hadn't even yet learned anything about nutrition or fitness, or, I mean, gyms were a terrifying space. And so, I mean, I went to one and I left for a few years and then I came back. I mean, it was scary, scary. And so, but it was this desperation for something that they had. And you'll notice that trend throughout my life, whether it was through the alcoholism recovery or through the getting into fitness or anything. It's just like, okay, they have something I want so much that I'm willing to experience the discomfort to go through to get there. And then I would love to tell you that I had some belief that I would ever be, but that isn't entirely true. I just borrowed the belief of people around me and was desperate enough to show up, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can go into more of any of that wherever you'd like to go, but I know there's a lot there.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, interesting though that that it is your life now is so different than really what people might perceive. Because I think a lot of times you do hear somebody that maybe has gone through some of that stuff, but they have been an athlete in the past, and it's kind of like, oh, I've that's what kind of brought me out of that. Like, was there something that really triggered a change in you? Like, is there, some people say there's this big seminal event that happens and that was it, or like, is there something there for you that way, or did it just kind of happen over time?
yeah, I would say in the Department of Fitness, it was gradual. In the
Hmm.
Department of Alcoholism, it was, of course, a final hoorah. It was a rock bottom, as they like to
Yeah.
call it. That was definitely, I had a specific event in that category of life that then catapulted me to the life I have today. And I want to be really clear that like that is what gave me the life I have today. And that foundation that was built just over 3 years ago, because that's when I got sober, was just over 3 years ago. And the event, kind of the course of the few months there, was just, I had already been struggling for, I started drinking when I was 13 years old, and it was blackout drinking from the very first time, and it was so normal for me. I was a bartender the week I turned 21. I mean, it was just, that was the world that I was in. So I was also dabbling over in the gym and trying to figure it out nutritionally. I went down all sorts of different avenues on the nutrition front. And in hindsight, I think it's, I mean, we're all in the journey, and some of it is just so hilarious. My refusal to eat certain things. Meanwhile, my extracurriculars were anything but healthy. But anyway, I was
Yeah.
attempting to figure it out, and I had never lived a life since I was an adolescent without those substances. So they were the coping mechanism that I grew up with, and that was what I knew. I did not know that I was a person who had the capacity to live without those things. And I had tried on my own for years here and there. I'm going to back off. And, I would write about it, and I had a desire to not show up that way, because when you're someone who blackout drinks, you do things you're not happy you did. And so that was very normal for me. And you come out of those situations and you go, I that's not me. I would never do that. I'll never do that again. That's, it truly does scare you. But if you don't understand what you suffer with addiction and with alcoholism, then you're a ticking time bomb until you need it again. And then once you start, you don't have control over what happens next if you have that disease. And I didn't understand that. And so thankfully, I say thankfully, but my grandmother, who had the largest involvement in my upbringing, she passed away in February of 2021. And when she passed away, I then was aware that grief was a thing I'd heard about that was unpleasant, and I was uninterested in doing that. And so I made a very clear, distinct decision after I took care of stuff that first week, because I was a doer always. And so I did stuff. And by then I had done a good job of compartmentalizing my life. I would be able to go on my little weekend vacation wherever I was going to go, and try to kind of shut off and not make my community back home so aware of what I was struggling with. I didn't even know what I was struggling with, but I was trying to hide those behaviors because of course I wasn't proud of them. But she passes away. I am now trying to, like, very aware, I'm trying to outrun grief through prescription medication, through alcohol, things like that. And after about 2 months of that charade, things had just gotten really bad. And so a specific event occurred, and I was publicly humiliated. And I think that for me, that was a really important piece of it. I had already had all these things going on in life that you would deem as traumatic, right? But they were normal. And then there was this detail of public humiliation for me. And I've always needed you to love me, right? I mean, we all want to be loved, and I'm no exception to that. And so all of a sudden, this public humiliation, I can no longer hide what's going on. And it was really bad. I mean, it was one of the worst things I've been through. And so for the first time, I was able, one, I look in the mirror after that and I'm like, I don't even recognize that girl. I
Mm-hmm.
don't trust her. I don't know her. It was very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the people I was so desperate for their love and approval, I didn't have it anymore. And so that was kind of the turning point for me, the rock bottom for me of, okay, I'm going to need to get some help. And so then I reached out to a community of people who were actively involved in recovery. And just kind of my note on that, if it's someone that's listening to this that's struggling with their own relationship with substances, I'm not saying I have all the answers for you, but I do have resources that I utilized then and utilized today that helped me a ton. And I'm happy to share those, so those people can contact me directly if they feel like I'd be a good resource for it. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you for that, and thank you for being so open with it too, because I think that impacts a lot of people. I mean, many more than I think people are even aware of. People kind of battling things like that. So thank you for that.
yeah.
You mentioned community, and there's community around what you were talking about there, but also, that's something that that you've built a lot of the last little while. But you obviously are very connected in CrossFit. CrossFit has it's known for a community around kind of fitness and around kind of your gyms and things like that. What kind of role did that play outside of obviously the true kind of just getting past the addiction? Um, what role does community play there for you?
Yeah, we all want to be loved. And
Yeah.
so, I think the one thing I didn't mention with that that's worth mention is simply just that, uh, you know, it was the first time I was able to go, like, if I don't take these actions, I don't have to be in these situations. And for whatever reason, that had never really clicked for me before. In that same way. And so that culmination of desperation and all of that of going, if I can figure out how to knock this off for real, then I don't have to be in this situation. And I really don't want to be in this situation. So as far as community goes, community is a huge part of my life. In fact, whenever we talk about the perceived success that I have today, I actually think, because in business, I'm very much so just going to be open and honest. And I'm newer into the world that I'm in now. And so
Hmm.
I'm really in that grind season of like,
Yeah.
I'm not as successful as it probably looks if we look at it on paper when it comes to monetary stuff. But the
Hmm.
success for me is like those connections. I mean, I cannot believe the people that I'm surrounded with, the people that I call friend today. It baffles me. And so when it comes to community, of course, I was involved in a local community of CrossFit and so on. Back then, I was still living in Oklahoma. I now live in Austin, Texas. And so that was a big part of it. But it was the community that was no longer approving of me that drove me to do something different. And of course, then I got busy in recovery and I started to become more involved with larger scale events in that world, in that community. And then
Hmm.
that kind of opened my eyes over the course of time to like the fitness community as a whole, not just CrossFit. That's my roots. I have tremendous love for it.
Yeah.
But the larger, broader audience of health.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it plays a huge role. I mean, I mean, so much of the to me, the success in life is truly the connections that I have, because the idea of like having a lot of money and not feeling fulfilled in my relationships to me doesn't sit well. So it's always been a big part. Yeah.
And considering that's such a big part, and you mentioned that, I mean, there's a lot of learning. So there's a lot of people that listen to our podcast that are entrepreneurs that, whether they're in your space or in other spaces, that's a tough thing to sometimes transition to. Is there something that stands out as, wow, that was way harder than I thought it was going to be, or is there like, what was that transition like trying to, and what is it like? Because it's ongoing, and is there something that stands out as, wow, I thought that would be easy. It's a heck of a lot harder than I thought it would be about building a business.
My expectations and reality were so far out of alignment, it's not even funny. And that's just my experience, because I had opened up a handful of businesses throughout my 20s. And the last career path that I'd had for 6.5 years prior to getting into the fitness industry for work was I was a real estate agent. And that also went well fast. And then if you play it out prior to that, other things I had done, it went well fast. And so I came in expecting, surely it'll go well fast. And I just had to eat some real humble pie and make myself a nice little pile of debt to have to sit in and figure out how to get out of it. So I expected myself to perform exceptionally well and didn't understand that the time horizon for success was going to need to be a bit expanded. So like in that department, I just was really out of alignment. But I mean, everything's hard. When I think of like the besides just the monetary expectations, and that's where I would, to this day, I say, like, if you want advice when it comes to like what you should do in business, like I'm yet to be your girl. When you want to talk about nutrition, or you want to talk about mindset or movement, I am an absolute nerd for those topics. And I'd love to have those conversations if you feel like it would be helpful. That one, we're still very much so a bozo on the bus.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the other hard stuff is just the imposter syndrome. I'm sure everyone has experienced that. When you first started your podcast, you probably felt like, oh, here's Joe Rogan or whoever, that like they've got it going on. And then there's me, and what the heck am I? And everybody's going to know that I'm the idiot who doesn't know what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
the first time you entered the gym, same thing. If you ever went to a CrossFit gym, I mean, I'm sure you have because you love us.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so do
Yes,
you
I
go to
have.
a CrossFit gym now?
I don't right at this time, but
Okay.
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was probably yet again like, oh my gosh, everyone in there knows what they're doing. And here
Sure.
I am. And they're
It's
going to be like,
scary.
who
Yeah.
is this idiot? When people have a tendency to respect those that are striving. And so the fact that you're just willing to show up and work hard is quite respectable anyway. And most people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I think that that's another hard piece of any time you step into a new journey is just, there is that lonely chapter. There is that period of time where you don't yet fit in where you're trying to go, but you don't really belong where you used to. And that's a really uncomfortable space, no matter what sector of life we're sticking it into.
Yeah, yeah. And you do mention kind of mindset being part of it. And I think there's actually a really close connection there too, is that from a fitness perspective, mindset plays a large part of it. And maybe for you, is that how do you coach people through that, I guess, knowing that, that's a big part of what you do. And how do you actually get people to maybe look at things differently or maybe have that positive mindset where maybe they're looking at it in not in a growth way. How do you approach it?
Yeah, believe in them. I mean, yeah, we can get more nuanced than that, and it certainly is. But from up front, like I've got to do something to build some rapport to earn some respect. You're not going to trust what I have to say if you don't know who I am and you have no reason to trust what I have to say. So I got to do some legwork up front to build credibility. So whether that's build an online brand that has some perceived success, whether that's just coach a ton of classes and you come in and that I've coached thousands of hours on the floor, whatever it is, I got to earn some respect. I need to build some rapport with you individually to where you feel safe with me. And then from there, and that you believe that I have your best interest at heart. And then everyone's individual relationship, if we're talking about through the fitness category,
Hmm.
everyone's relationship with pain is so individualized. Everyone's relationship with fear, discomfort in the realm of fitness, in my experience, is so unique. And so there's a lot more nuance. There's not really absolutes. Like you just kind of, as
Hmm.
a coach, I need to observe each individual and try to understand what's going on and converse with them, like ask them questions. And so it is a back and forth and it isn't overnight. But I think that the big easy grab that you can do always if you're going to be coaching is just believe in them. Like there's no reason that any individual can't get better if they don't want to. And then understanding, or if they want to, and then understanding that 1% better is 1% better. So I coach a high skill barbell class. And with that one, of course, I don't control who all signs up. And so there's newbies in there all the time. And I regularly in the beginning of the class, just like to remind everybody like, hey, this is the intent. And so I got really clear with my communication. This is what we're going for here. And then from there, if you learn one new thing, you crushed it. And,
Yeah.
and so, just kind of setting those expectations up front and believing that they can get better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's amazing what can happen if they do believe that. So,
Oh,
um, maybe the other part, and this is a two-part question, I guess, a little bit, because the part of it is personally for you, and then how you translate that, whether it's similar to your clients, is that goal setting. Like, are you a write everything down kind of person? Do you have very specific kind of sets of goals for yourself and the different parts of life that you have there? And that's the first question. The second one is also how do you translate that to people that are coming to you that maybe don't have a lot of experience setting specific goals, things like that?
yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to the fitness realm, I
Mhm.
love the idea of having something on the calendar for someone who, I mean, at anybody, but to have something to strive towards, I think is great. So picking a race, picking a competition, picking a something that maybe scares the crap out of you and
Yeah.
putting that on the calendar gives you something to work towards. But in pretty much any other area of life, I don't have timeline attachments, whether it's professionally or relationally or with nutrition, body composition, you name it,
Hmm.
any of those types of goals. Yeah, I have a direction I want to go, but I don't necessarily have a timeline associated. And that's my personal opinion based on my experience in life of any
Yeah.
time that I think that something's going to go a certain way by a certain time frame, I'm often proven wrong. And so I just kind of learned to let go of that for my own enjoyment of the experience. And from there, what then I do is I just get really, okay, so your goal is you want to be blank body composition. Your goal is you want to be out of debt. Your goal is you want your first million, whatever it is. And instead, entirely obsessing over what are the actions and the behaviors of the person that has those things. And so
Yeah.
instead of, I need this by this time, because that's kind of the concept of shouting affirmations in the mirror. And if you don't do anything else with it, if I write down on my board blank and then I don't have any sort of action to go with it, I don't really have anything to work with. Like, that's a great goal, but what are we doing? And so for me, I would much rather get really clear on what are the actions and the behaviors of the person, and then
Yeah.
just iterate on those.
Yeah. Kind of focusing on the process, I guess, more so
Oh,
than just an end goal that, may or may not be exact. So, yeah, very cool. Um, when you've talked about how you have lots of connections now. You've built a good network, obviously, and things like that. So how do you approach like do you have specific mentors that I really would love to, you know, to mimic some of the things that they do? Do you have a couple of those people, or do you take bits and pieces away from a bunch of different people? How does that work for you, Claire?
yeah, I appreciate these questions are great. And anyway, I appreciate your time. I know I already said that at the beginning, but I do appreciate this. I
Thanks.
love these questions. And then I want to flip them all back on you. And I yet again understand the time. I probably can't, but I'm curious. Anyway, feel free to answer any of them yourself if you would like. As far as mentors goes, I think about, like, do they have what I want in that category of life? And so I've got different, and so mentors come in the form of friends that could be younger than me or older than me. I'm just saying, as an example, people I know personally that I can call and text. They can be people who understand the principles that I'm trying to live by, and they can hold me accountable to those things whenever I contact them. They know their role. And so that's one form of mentorship. But another one is, you hear the phrase all the time, which is just, you're the sum of the five people that you surround yourself with. And sure, yes, we are going to kind of default to that around us. But for me, I jokingly say all the time that, for example, I hang out with Layla Hormozy all the time. Now, she does not know my name that I'm aware of, but she has a lot of content out there and she gives a ton. And so that would be a person. I can certainly list off a handful of other ones, but different people I would consider to be mentors that, no, they have no idea who I am. But because of the internet, I've got great access to the way that they think. And so I'm very, very mindful of where I'm spending my energy in that way. And so those are mentors to me. But yet again, then it comes down to, there's nothing wrong with having someone who mentors you in the financial department of your life, but maybe not the relational or whatever. At least for me, I just kind of select, okay, I'm going to go to this specific person for this specific category because I like what they've got going on here. They seem to have figured something out. And then I'm going to go over here for this different thing. It doesn't all have to come from the same person. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So that's
Yeah,
my.
I find that interesting because I think a lot of people think I need to emulate somebody just very particular, but you really don't necessarily see their entire life that way. Sometimes you may see a part of their life that is very, they've given lots of information on. So, I think of there's lots of business people that listen to, I want to be like Elon Musk, I want to be like whoever. But a lot of times
Hey,
it's
Sanchez.
yeah.
This is a friend of mine. I want to plug her because she's great.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are times where that absolutely is the right way to go. And if you want to build a business in a certain way or whatever those things it is, but sometimes you also have to look at your situation, your family situation, what you want to do may be very different on the broad scale of what success really is for you. So I find that interesting just because I would think that's a healthy approach sometimes is to take bits and pieces about their expertise that are that are you want, but you may not want their whole life replicated, if you know what I mean. Like, I think that's an interesting take. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you wanted to look to one person, dig it, you mentioned Elon, dig a little bit deeper, I think doesn't,
yeah,
and he's not one that I consume a ton of, so I don't want to misquote, but I believe he said something to the effect of, you wouldn't want to live inside of his brain, right? Is he one that
right.
said something of that nature? So
Yes,
that,
yes,
the repercussions for being someone like him are something that he even states clearly, like, I don't think you want this, so can
right.
you take bits and pieces and apply them based on, like, the life that you want?
Yeah, yeah. No, great thoughts there for sure. Um, so I guess when now, like, over the next little while, I mean, obviously you've thought to kind of build what you're building, and you have really started to build a really nice community online as well. How your approach from that end is that is that difficult to do because I know it can be a little different now, trying to build that type of community and build your profile while at the same time building the business underneath that. What are your goals over the next little while to be able to do that? And how hard is it to build that kind of community? Because a lot of people are probably going to look at you and think, oh yeah, she's done an awesome job of that, and it was super easy for you, and I know it isn't. So I'll kind of throw that out. How do you do that? And what's your approach, and how do you see that growing over the next little while?
Yeah, it's expectations and reality. I have a different perspective on it today than I did whenever I started it. And,
Yeah.
when I came into the fitness industry for work, I came in for a specific job that quickly upon arrival ceased to exist. So I moved to Austin, Texas for a job. And within a matter of weeks, I am informed that the job is no longer mine or even exists for that matter. The company has taken a pivot and I'm no longer needed. And so then I have accumulated by this point in time a number of different coaching certifications with zero desire to coach. I just wanted the education. But
Yeah.
now I need a job. And now I'm here and people are telling me I need to do that thing. And so I really just took my first coaching role out of got to do something. This is what everyone's telling me to do. I don't know. And I'm so grateful that I did. I had a lot of resistance towards it because I had known so many individuals who would try to do it on the side and really struggle to get in their own fitness and enjoy the experience and not get themselves so overwhelmed and not be able to make a good living. And so because of the examples that I had seen there, it had me going, I don't know. And so now being a coach, I have a very different perspective on that of yeah, I expected to make a lot more money a lot faster than I have. And I'm also just not, I don't have the best approach. If that's my true north, then my approach, well, you just wouldn't have my approach because I will have this whole life approach. And so as a result, I'm willing to go a bit slower there if that means that I get to upkeep all of these other things that make me feel like a whole human. And so there's that, but definitely just like slowing my expectations and my time horizon, showing up consistently, understanding that like, you hear different podcasters that are really successful or anyone who's really successful and they speak about, think in decades and things like that. And so I've just shifted my perspective and gone, okay, you know what? I do just so happen to love this job so much, which is funny because I fought it like hell, but I do love doing it. It is extremely fulfilling. I already, before in my previous career, I quite enjoyed getting people through the transaction of buying a home. It was a big thing.
Yeah.
And so I really liked being able to help people through that journey. But coming in and being able to help someone completely transform their quality of life on the health front, like that is a whole other level of fulfillment. And so as a result, I've taken a massive pay cut at this time and understand that it's where I want to be anyway. And so, okay, fine. It's the same thing with my podcast. I just posted the 77th episode today. It's gone through, we're now in season 3. It's been a journey. And with that, my expectations were I'm going to monetize fast and this is going to be really big.
Yep.
And over the course of time, I've just had to shift my perspective. I love having these conversations. This is such a beautiful container for this. The fact that anyone wants to consume this is so cool. And if nothing else, I have now encapsulated all of these experiences, had all of these conversations I wouldn't have otherwise had. I mean, okay, fine. If it turns into something outwardly successful monetarily, then that's fine. But that's not where it is today. And I don't care to sell a narrative that's not true.
Yeah.
So I do
Yeah.
think if I had prioritized better that monetization piece, then definitely that's one of the things that I got to be clear on. Like I have not done a good job of that. I've been really focused on building relationships and just kind of put off all of the monetary gain or, reaching out for partnerships or anything like that. Like full disclosure, I just haven't been doing it. I just am not bothered at this time about it. So not saying that somebody would have the same experience, but
No,
anyway.
no, no, but it's true. I think a lot of people think that just suddenly that happens, and it really doesn't. And it's all in your approach to it. I mean, I was saying before, you get to have amazing conversations with really interesting people. So if you take it from that approach, all the other stuff is great if it happens, and whatever happens with it. Um, I guess the other thing that I wondered about a little bit with that is that have kind of connections with people as you go through that inspire you as you're going through this. How do you also you talked about you have an approach now where it's a little more kind of looking, you want all of the things kind of in life kind of at the same time, a little bit, well, at the same time, but you want something broader than just kind of one thing that maybe is a different approach than some. And I'm just wondering, how do you balance those things? Because obviously, you want to have a social life, you want to be able to do your own fitness stuff, and you want a business, and you've got a podcast and other things. How do you manage that to try to have more of that kind of whole life approach?
Yeah, you're saying all of this and it just cracks me up because I live inside of my brain and then I listen to you say it back to me and I'm like, sweetie, you have an insatiable appetite for life. Wow. Okay. Good luck.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, apparently that is true. And so
yeah,
be it. You know, I think the term that gets thrown around so much, but it's appropriate here, of course, is boundaries, right? Like I do understand what my priorities are. And so with that, there's like a pecking order of what's going to, what doesn't get to slip through the cracks. And so for me, because I'm an alcoholic in recovery, there are certain actions that I need to take to upkeep my recovery in order for, just based on where I'm trying to go in life. And so that like kind of sits at the top, right? Like I got to take care of that stuff first and foremost. And so no matter what happens on the calendar, like there are certain actions I got to take that just got to stick in there. And then from there, obviously right now I'm trying to grow my business. That's a huge priority for me. And so that is up next. I even I mentioned Layla Hormozy, but Layla and Alex, they speak openly about their ideas when it comes to their marriage versus their business. And I so appreciate all of the ideas they've shared that I didn't know were an option. And I'm not saying I entirely agree, but I love that they're willing to tell where they come from because I also do have a boyfriend and I really enjoy that relationship. He's a huge priority to me. My mother and father are a priority to me. Like all of a sudden, we've got a lot going on already, and I haven't even gotten anything fun, even though I love my life. I do. But so it's just, the business is going to take up a large chunk of time, and that's fine. Then my relationship, my partnership is going to come next, right? And so that's going to still take up a decent amount of time, but to be honest, it shouldn't take up nearly as much time. At least that's my opinion. And thankfully I have a partner that's very driven in his own thing, and so it really helps me to not feel like I'm not giving enough there because I'm kind of inspired by and motivated by his actions because he's going and getting his own thing, which is quite nice. So I really appreciate that. It's been very, very therapeutic for me.
yeah,
Anyway, I mean, from there, then we could just get, whittle on down to the little extracurriculars. Are you going to go out on the boat on the weekend? Are you going to, whatever? And so I appreciate those invites so much. And it's seasons of life. And I'm not in a season of life where fun stuff, purely fun stuff gets a lot of yes. It's just a lot of no. And finding ways in which, if people want to spend time together outside of like my work and so on, like understand, like I've got kind of, I'll see you at church. That's something I do. I'll see
yeah,
you at this. There are certain things that I do where you can kind of bring it all together. And then that's the season I'm in. It's a lot of no's. I will say another one is like, obviously I'm in the fitness industry. And so my health is a priority to me, but right now it's not me as athlete, it's me as coach. So I upkeep my fitness really well because I love doing so. And I do need to walk the talk, right? But
yeah,
from there, so when people want to get together over coffee, that's a no for me. But if you want to go on a walk or something like that, maybe we could talk about that because I just stack those two things to where I'm still getting in some intentional movement. We can still do the interaction. And so, yeah, it's just finding ways. I mean, I figured out how to podcast all of my interesting conversations, if you will, so that way, like, boom, now this serves as content and these other things that are helping grow the business. But I also get to have a conversation with a person that I find delightful. Boom, like how can we
yeah.
stack to get things done efficiently, I suppose.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you for the insights on that too.
That was a
Uh,
lot.
yeah, no, that's great. And so the one thing that we ask everybody that comes on the show, Clara, is that we try to leave kind of the audience with a couple of things at the end, and obviously lots of great stuff today that I'm sure they're already kind of writing down and scrawling down. So that's great. But the one thing is because you have had a bit of that kind of reset and rebuild and are I think a good example of how to do that the right way. And I'm just wondering for people out there who, might have been struggling with something, maybe have even just lost a job, have done something like that, and they really need to kind of reset themselves and hit that kind of rebuild or at least kind of take a new perspective. Do you have a couple of tips on how to tackle that first little bit to that maybe worked for you or that you knowing now you might have done things differently?
Yeah. I'll give you a bit of like a conceptual and then like a real tactical.
Yeah,
And So one, I just want to say, since I know we're getting near the end, that
Yeah.
the listener, like if they're still here, then their time is super valuable. And I recognize that. And so the fact that they've still hung out this length of time, I just appreciate that from them. So
Yeah.
whoever you are, if you're listening, thank you for choosing to be here. From there, as far as like, how do we overcome setbacks? How do we get back up when we get knocked down, stuff like that? You know, there's a lot of phrases that go on in my brain. These are all things that I've just been taught. I'd love to say I was inherently wise, but that's not true. So success is attracted to action, right? So if I'm stagnant, then it's repelled by it. And so a lot of times it could be really easy whenever something gets us down to try to stay down. But if I stay in the same room and stay down, those walls get closer and closer to me. I have a problem. Now I'm dealing with anxiety. Now I'm dealing with depression. Now I'm dealing with really real scary stuff. I have got to move. I've got to physically, literally go. And so the specific tactical tool that I've used, which I'm not saying it's perfect, but I've used it multiple times, is literally the 75 hard challenge. And so, but you could just, and the reason I've done that I've done it 4 times now, I think. But it's a challenge, 75 days in length. It's a number of different activities that you have to accomplish every day, whether it's exercise, drinking water, there's a number of different things you got to do. And so the first time I did it was shortly after I got sober, because it was the first time that sobriety is a part of it. You can't drink alcohol. And so I had never been able to do it before, but all of a sudden I could do it. Yay.
Yeah.
And then I did it shortly after a breakup. I was heartbroken. So you know what? I needed to take some right action, and things weren't going well for me professionally at that point either. So I had just not been taking action in ways that I could be proud of, and I needed to take some esteemable action. So I never thought that 75 hard was perfect, and I didn't care. It gave me a place to put my feet. And so that's so much of it is just, what is the next action that I'm taking? I can act myself into right thinking. I can build some what's the word I'm looking for?
Momentum.
Momentum.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. So that then that way, then I've got
Yeah.
some discipline, then I've got something to work with here, but I've got to build that. So that's a specific tool that, yet again, I'm not really concerned with if it's perfect or not. It has worked for me over and over again when I have found myself in a position in life going, sweetie, you made a mess. You're going to need to do something a bit better. And so
Yeah.
that works. Yeah.
Yeah. So super interesting because we interviewed somebody just a couple of days ago for the podcast as well. It's the exact same thing. Basically said that that was what made a difference about kind of getting their head wrapped around, thinking around positive mindset and about just healthy approach to things for a little while and kind of build some habits. You may not keep all of the habits, but at least you're kind of resetting a little bit and the things that work, stay on because you've done enough of it over a period of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And discipline is a perishable skill, so we got to like re-up on it when we find
Yeah.
ourselves like we're just human. There's nothing, if you find yourself in a state that you're not proud of, welcome to being human. Just get up and do something different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, thanks very much for leaving some great stuff with the audience, but also obviously hearing lots. And I know people are going to want to follow you and hear more from your podcast as well. I've listened to it lots of times. It is fantastic. So what are some of the best ways to follow you and maybe kind of listen in on your podcast and any of those things, Claire?
Yeah, thank you. I'm assuming you'll put stuff in the show notes, so
I
hopefully they
will.
can just scroll right on down to select that. But my Instagram account is probably where I'm most active on social media. That's just my name. It's ClaireBays. I
Yep.
have a website for my coaching. If you want to apply for group, it's $39 a month. It's insanely cheap for what you get. And you can take a look at that on the website. I'll say that here in a moment. And then there's also an elevated experience of one-to-one, and there's a couple of different structures for that. So the application is there. It takes less than 2 minutes there. That's at clairebayscoach.com. And then last but not least is the podcast, which is Conversations with Claire. I know, really revolutionary, but hey, at least you won't have a hard time remembering it. And that can be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube. The full length videos are now on YouTube, which is exciting.
Awesome.
And that's about it.
Very cool. And as Claire mentioned, we will put it in the show notes. So if you missed any of that, just go into the show notes and you'll see you can click through, follow all of those things and take a listen. Claire has not only herself, she has some great guests on there too that she's got some really interesting stories herself that she's pulled out. And again, if you haven't hit subscribe on the podcast, do that right now here. We have great people every week, just like Claire. But again, I know super busy, obviously, with lots of great things going on, but thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us today, Claire.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well. Thank
Awesome.
you.
And everybody else, we will talk again on Big Idea, Big Moves.